So you've all seen publicity about and copies of the book One Day in October, which we've mentioned earlier. And we are particularly fortunate to have Yadin and Oriya, and I'll tell you a little bit about them to explain why. Yadin is an Israeli film, television and stage actor, a reserve officer in Israeli Special Forces. He was wounded in the October 7th attacks, sustaining serious injuries whilst attempting to save residents of Kibbutz Be'eri in the face of hordes of murderous Hamas terrorists. After 8 operations and many months of rehabilitation, he is now able to speak about his experiences and those of others in his unit on that fateful day. And to do so, he decided to travel the world to be an advocate for Israel and the IDF. His most recent role is a movie called Arugman Bey, which is coming to cinemas in December. Oriya teaches Judaism, Gemara, Hasidut, and philosophy in various settings, and is Yoetzet Halakha. She is the author of the bestselling Ma'at Mevakeshet in Israel, soon to be published in English, and is an editor-in-chief at Magid Books. Together with Yair Agmon, she is the co-editor of One Day in October, which has become a bestseller in Israel. I'm also particularly grateful to you both for traveling at this time of the year, coming to London for 36 hours barely, at this time of the year between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and especially Yair, given you have that 7-week-old Yonatan Lavi at home. Yep. So we thank Abda as well very much for letting you come, especially given how busy she is today with her media work. And we are delighted to have you here. And we're going to start with Oriya explaining to us a little bit about the book, but also telling us some of the stories, some of the particularly, I think, heart-rending and significant parts of the stories in the book, and giving us an insight into what the book and those stories are meant to convey.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. English is not my native language, so I'll do my best. When I was told I was about to speak in front of 1,000 people, I felt such an embrace. And there are no words can describe how much this gives to me. So I really, really thank you so much for everyone here and everyone who is watching us from at home. Also for the non-Jewish people that are here. This is really, really, really important for us. It's not easy to be a Jew these days. For a whole year now, we in Israel have been watching in horror at the manifestations of anti-Semitism that you're all experiencing here in London and also around the world. This breaks our hearts. In Israel, sorry, I do like this in my heart. In Israel, there's a lot of challenges, but anti-Semitism is not one of them. So it just really, I want to thank you for being a Jew these days around the world. Take it for the team. And I'm gonna really read some excerpts from the stories, and I want to highlight a certain theme. Those heroes that I'm gonna read about, they all have a common denominator. They all, in a certain point of their story, faced death, and they were certain that they were about to die. A lot of heroes and heroines in the book thought at one point or another that they're about to die because there are terrorists outside and I'm in the safe room, so maybe it's possible that I'll die. But those specific heroes, they're really, like, if we ask ourselves logically, what are the chances that they will survive the situation and emerge on the other side alive? The answer would be none. 0 chances. And they did survive, and they're here to tell us something, to give us a message. So I would like to bring their message here to you by reading some parts of their story. So the first one I'm gonna speak about, her name is Or Ben Yehuda. And she is the commander of Karakal Battalion. She's 35, she has 3 children. And at this October 7th, she got a phone call from her friend telling her, oh, my soldiers are in Sufa outspot, and the outspot has been overrun. So she says to him, okay, I'm on my way, she took only 12 soldiers with her, that's what she had, that's what she could do. And on the way, she's repeating those words. What do you mean? Hamutzav nichbash. Like the outspot has been overrun. You can like be in the army in Israel for your whole life and never hear those terrifying words. And she doesn't know what she's going to meet. And then she gets to the outspot and outpost, that's the word, outpost. And she finds soldiers wounded, and she hears a lot of shooting. And then she asks them to give her, to describe the situation, and they tell her that 30 soldiers are, I don't know, maybe I should say occupied in the living room. And there are terrorists that keep throwing grenades and shooting at them, and the soldiers, they don't give up. And that's the situation. So O says, okay, she of course she calls for help, but help came a long time later. So she decides that she's gonna keep this situation not to escalate. And then she does this. At some point, that's what she's telling us about the moment that she realized that she's about to die. And I think you'll all agree with her. Okay? If you don't know that she's alive today, I'll ask you the question, what are the odds to maintain living after this situation? I guess you'll say that there are no odds. At some point, I noticed that there's a defensive earthwork, an embankment to my west, a huge one. And I say to myself that it would be good position. The terrorists will be coming in from there. It's the closest point to Gaza. I start heading there with my command team. We jump up, run, take cover, jump up again, run, take cover, over and over until we reach the edge of the embankment. So I turn my head to the side and see a sight I will never forget as long as I live. I remember the situation so clearly. I peer, lift my head up, then bring my head back down, then look to the side again. Some 5 pickup trucks are coming at me, and packs of motorcycles. And terrorists are hopping between the dunes, between the trees, all in combat vests and uniforms, and advancing in our direction. I can't even count them. There are hundreds. And in the distance, behind them, are long lines of people from Gaza who are just marching in our direction, some armed, some unarmed. And I say to myself, well, that's it. This is where I'm going to die, right here, on this spot. I'm going to die here. I've been in many encounters and many firefights in my life, but it never felt like this. It never even came close to this. This time, I accepted death. I came to terms with death. I understood that that's how it is. I remember looking up and apologizing to my children. In my heart, I begged them to forgive me. They're so little and so cute, and I'd never come back to them, never see them again. That was it. I saw this was really the end. Okay, I'm gonna just stop right here, but then I'll come back to the story, okay? And I'm gonna move, jump to the next hero. His name is Mickey, and here you'll see in the book that we have a comment, for security reasons, Mickey's full name cannot be published. I think you can understand. Also in the media, he gave only 2, I think, interviews, and he's always covered. And I think you can understand that he's a really special someone, okay? And the terrorists realized it. They knew they had information about him, and they came, and at some point he realized, he lives in kibbutz Nachal Oz with his family. At some point he realized that those terrorists are not just there because they want to kill him because he's a Jew. They want to kidnap him because he's Mickey and has a certain position, and at some point they even admit it. So his story begins with those lines. Never in my whole life did I think that the idea of killing my wife and my daughter would ever cross my mind for even a fraction of a second. But there was a point there when the terrorists were at the door of the safe room, a point when we realized that this was it. My wife and I look at each other in total silence when my daughter, she's 6-year-old, isn't looking. And my wife makes this sign of 2 fingers walking like legs and shakes her head. No, she's basically saying without words, we are not going with them. Then she points her fingers like a gun and points it at herself, then at our daughter, and then at me. That's basically her way of telling me, if they come in, kill me, then kill Neda, then yourself. And I nod. And I put my hand over my heart, signaling to her, I'm sorry, forgive me. She signals that she is sorry too, and she smiles, a sad, sad smile. That's how the story begins. But then he starts telling the whole story, how it all started at 6 a.m. in the morning, 6:30. I'll just tell you the situation. Why did they decide this, almost got to this conclusion that they have to do this terrible thing? The situation is like this. He realized at some point that those terrorists that he hears outside are here. They really want to intrude to their home. So he leaves his wife and kid and child in the safe room and goes to the living room with only one gun and ammunition. And then the terrorists start to come through the windows, and he takes them down one after another for 2.5 hours. One man with a gun against, a lot of terrorists that have automatic weapon and grenades, and they just can't kill him. At some point, he says that they got so frustrated, they just started shooting all over, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then they threw a grenade at him, and the grenade exploded, and he fell down on the floor. And in those 2 seconds, they managed to almost get inside the safe room to his wife and daughter. So he managed to get them to get there before them, and then he closed the door of the safe room. And as we know, the safe room, unfortunately, they don't have locks. So now they begin to fight over the handle, okay? And the terrorists shoot at him, and he gets wounded, but he's still holding the handle, and they can't open the door. And then they attach explosive charge to the door, and the door explodes. And now the situation is like this. He holds the door, and they have a hole, that size of a hole. And he sees through the hole, he sees the commander, the Machshmo V'zichro, I don't know his name, but he was the commander of the Nukhbat, of the terrorists that came to Nahal Oz, aiming an RPG towards him. And behind him, a lot of other terrorists. And he says to him, either you come out with us and come with us, or I just shoot you and the whole room explodes, and your wife and daughter and you are going to die. That's the moment when they decide, okay, that's the moment when they ask themselves, what are the chances that we are going to get out of here alive? The third hero, I'm not going to read her story, I'm just going to tell you about her. Till now we spoke about 2 heroes, one that faced death but didn't die in the end. The third hero is someone who died but came back. Who is she? It's a girl. I'll tell you the story of how did I get this to know this story. Maybe you remember 5 days after October 7th. Maybe you remember a video that it became viral, I think, in Israel and also maybe here. You see a man that's giving an interview to the Sky News, I think. He's shattered, he's crying, and he's saying, they told me she's dead. And I went, yes! You remember this video? That's Thomas Hand, Emily's amazing father. And he said yes, because it's even, you know why? Because if you choose between dying and being a hostage at Hamas, so dying is the better option. And when I saw this video, I collapsed. I saw this girl and she's saying she's dead. And I want all of us to just come back for a second to that minute that we saw this video. Did any of us think that this girl might not be actually dead? I mean, this thought is so, it couldn't even occur to us. And I think that now I'm going to read what Or has done, and also then I'll read to you what Mickey says. And I think we really need to take this like as the message that these heroes want to address to us. So I'm coming back to Or's story, and she's that's what she's saying to us. Okay, so she's saying, I saw this was really the end, and then I said to myself, okay, if this is the end, then I'll end it well. I'll die standing tall. I'll do the very best I can, and I'll fight until my last drop of blood. So I turned to my soldiers, a group of 12 brave fighters who were waiting for me to tell them what to do. I turned to them with a half smile. They told me afterwards that I smiled. I didn't remember that. And I say to them, let's go, let's take them apart. And they all shout, let's do it. They come to the embankment with heavy machine guns, with whatever they can carry, and we take our place there and start shooting at anyone approaching the outpost. We shoot like crazy people, and at a certain point, we have a light anti-tank missile. So at one point, we launch it towards one of the Hamas trucks, and the truck explodes. A tremendous explosion, something extreme. The truck must have been loaded with explosives. And the blast takes with it some motorcyclists and who were nearby, and we continue fighting. And then I suddenly realized that many of the terrorists are beginning to retreat, to turn around and run back. And I suddenly understand that we are, in fact, doing something significant here. This woman and her soldiers, of course, by the way, 18-year-old kids, that's were her 12 soldiers. They saved the Mutzav, the outpost, but they also saved a lot of settlements, a lot of villages, because those terrorists had maps of I don't know where, like inside of Israel, and they didn't come back to occupy them. And now I'm going to read you what Mickey is saying. Okay, Mickey is the one that, he's standing in front of this hole in the door, and the RPGs is in front of him, and I'm not going to tell you how he came out of it, because you're going to have to read it in the book, and it's too long, really. No, in Israel, I tell people, if you feel like you're too scared to read this book because it's hard, it's a hard book, even though it gives us a lot of comfort, but it's really also hard and sad. I tell people, just go inside a bookstore, read Mickey's stories, close the book, and get out. This is really important. So Mickey, he says to us, he says, I don't feel like a hero. I don't feel like a hero. I'm not like happy. A lot of my friends died. It's not like I don't feel like I'm not high. But he says, but there's something else in this whole story that gives me strength. There's that expression, I stared death in the face. Me, I didn't just stare death in the face. I embraced it. I made my peace with it. I even thought of helping it along. What would have happened if my wife and I had given up? If after they blew up the door to our safe room, we had just given up? To tell you the truth, it terrifies me. It terrifies me to think about it. I was certain that we weren't going to make it. A few times, I was convinced of that, absolutely certain. But somehow I got through the whole story, and my family is alive, still alive. And today I can say with absolute certainty, En Yeush Ba'olam. There's no despair in the world. That's a very strong feeling of mine. There's no despair. There's no such thing as giving up. Even when you see the end, even when you're sure that it's over, don't give up. Never, ever give up. I think those heroes that faced death and emerged at the other side, they know something that we don't. They understand that when we have a certain feeling that something has come to its end, we should not automatically believe it. Believing that feeling and following it, thinking that the end has already occurred, even though it hasn't. This is what we call despair. And the heroes in this book command us not to give in to despair, not only because you must never despair, but because despair is an illusion, it's false. And now, before I give Yadin, it's time for Yadin to speak. I just want to say a few words about Yadin. I'm honored to sit here with really Gibor Israel Yadin. I think he deserves like this really amazing applause. Yadin is one of those heroes that came back from the dead. And I'm just going to read a few sentences from your story about this moment when you were really, really badly injured and people really thought that you were dying. And you also thought you were dying. And you say, that's what you're saying to us. Right then, when it happened, Yadin says, I remember two thoughts went through my head. The first was that I have to survive. That is, I have to keep holding my gun. I have to stay alert. And the second thing I was thinking about was Adva. Suddenly, Adva popped in my head. To be specific, I was regretting that I hadn't married her yet, that I hadn't had kids with her yet, that we hadn't started a family. That's what I thought about. That's what was in my head as we lay there. That's what kept me alive. And then Yael says, after the helicopter evacuated him, he says, in the helicopter on the way to the hospital, right after we take off, I suddenly have this feeling like my whole body is being cleansed. Suddenly everything is just falling away from me. I don't feel any pain anymore. And I feel like I'm being drawn out of my body. I think I died for a moment. Luckily, my friend from the team noticed and slapped me on the face. He grabbed my head and said, if you close your eyes one more time, I will kill you myself. I woke up. I came back from the dead. So Yadin, we would really appreciate it if you could just tell us about it. Tell us about your story. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Does it work? Yes. Thank you very much for having us, and thank you, Oriya, for that introduction. I will give a little context to that sentence that she said, not in the helicopter, but the one where two things kept me alive. It was after about 10 hours of battle in Kibbutz Kfar Aza and then Kibbutz Be'eri. And we were on our way to the mass hostage situation that was in Kibbutz Be'eri, today known as the House of Pessi, Abayit Shel Pessi. Then it was known as the dining room of Kibbutz Be'eri. And we had intel that there were 50 hostages being held. We were on our way there. We had one house left between us and that house. I was leading my team. I was first in line. David was second. And on the way to that house, we were both hit. I was hit by 7 bullets altogether, 3 that stopped my equipment, 4 that went through. My arm, shoulder, chest. David was hit by 10 bullets, all went through. And that moment where she said 2 things were keeping me alive was after 45 minutes that we were under cover, behind cover, still fighting, both of us bleeding out, dying. My team, 15 guys, 5 of us are injured, surrounded by hundreds of terrorists fighting for their life. And 45 minutes of basically bleeding out to death and seeing death approaching you slowly but surely. And it was a moment where we both knew that we were dying, but we both knew that we will fight until we're dead. It doesn't matter when it comes. And that's what we did. Luckily enough, my team managed to get to us, pull us out after an hour of waiting there and fighting. And David, Zichrono Livracha, died on the way to the hospital in the helicopter, lying down next to me. He has a wife, Anat, a son, Shaked, who is a year and 7 months old. He was 7 months old at the time. And that's a little context about that. This book, One Day in October, the name of the book, the title of the book, I don't know the reason why that was chosen. I'll tell you the reason. It suits me. We grow up in Israel knowing that one day will come. And we don't know what that one day will be. That one day could be seeing death. That one day could be being shot at for the first time. It could be seeing your friend die. And it could be you getting hit, you being injured, and it could be you giving your life for your country and for your people. But what is definite is that one day will for sure absolutely come for all of us. And I grew up in Jerusalem during the Second Intifada, seeing death pretty much every single day, surviving different terrorist attacks, 2 terrorist attacks, one next to my house in a coffee shop, one on a bus that I missed and saw it explode in front of my eyes. We grew up around death and around terrorism and people wanting to kill us at all times, but that one day never came. For me, that feeling that I was looking for, what that one day will be, never came until that day, till October 7th. Wasn't my first war, won't be my last, but that day was October 7th. And that moment that it came, it wasn't the moment where we were driving on Highway 232, the blood highway, seeing the dead bodies and driving through. It wasn't being attacked for the first time on that highway, joining a different team in battle, killing those terrorists and then continuing off. It was the moment where we were in a house in Kibbutz Be'eri, conquered, already fought terrorists in a kid's playground. We were shooting through a slide, finished that battle, different battles, and we conquered a house. And we set up around that house. I had my gun, big machine gun outside the window, and I see a terrorist in front of me. We start shooting at the terrorist, and my commander comes behind me and taps me on the back as we're fighting those 2 terrorists. And he says to me, "I'm taking your water." And I say, "Go ahead." And he takes my water, and we're shooting at us. And we finish fighting those terrorists, and I look back, and there's a family who was stuck in the safe room. Some of them, their family members, were executed in front of them in the safe room by terrorists who were in that house before we came. We battled those terrorists and then saved that family, and they had no water. And my commander trusted us to fight those terrorists, and he was in charge of giving that family water and bringing them back to life. And that moment where I see terrorists in front of me, a family in back of me, and we are that barrier in between them. That is that moment that I understood what one day in October, what that one day is for me. And that contract that we have as soldiers between us and between the citizens, between us, between our country that we love, that contract that we say we will put our life on the line at any moment, and we will save strangers who I've never met before, and we will give them the last drop of water that we have. That's my contract. And that is the meaning, for me at least, of what one day in October. And I'll say one more thing before we move on to the more conversation part of this not so conversation. My story starts and ends with me talking about Adva, my fiance, and the mother of my child, Yonatan Levi. And it's weird to read a story about, I think, a battle and a soldier, and the way that Oriya decided to start and end with that was, for me, the whole thing for a few reasons. And the two main reasons are, first of all, Adva, some of you may not know her, it's your loss. She is what I think a real hero is. She's a journalist. On October 7th, she went to the Nova Festival, deserted her journalism job, and went to save lives. And she was the first one there, giving medical attention to kids, and then driving to where the terrorists were shooting at kids, yelling to them to jump in her car, drove them out. That's what she did all day. And she really was what kept me alive. That's what I was thinking about in the last moments. They say your entire life flashes in front of your eyes. It's a lie. It doesn't. But the important things do. And she was that one important thing that kept me alive. And the last thing I'll say is that she once said, when in a conversation with my team, she said to me that I went to die. That I was the first, I ran first in my team, and I'm not saying that because I'm number one, it's just specifically that day I was at the front. And she said, you went to die. And I told her that I didn't, I went to save. And if the price is to die, then that's the price. But this whole war is about people who are fighting for love, to save because we love our people, and people who are fighting out of hate. And that is this whole war. And thank you very much for coming.
So one of the things, Yadin, you've been able to do in a most remarkable way, we've only just heard a tip of the iceberg of what's in your story in the book. But one of the things you've been able to do is to nonetheless, despite this really horrific experience which defies words, you've been able to travel, as we mentioned before, and share that experience with others. What might you be able to share with us from the experiences you've had of talking about your experience, about the values you have shared, and what that tells you perhaps particularly about a message of hope for the future for Israel, for the Jewish people?
So I've been traveling a lot and speaking and telling my story around universities in the US. That was my main goal. That's why I started this whole thing. And also around Europe, I was in Germany and France, and I spoke to South African students, and pretty much I've been around. And the first thing that I thought I wanted to do was change everybody's minds and tell them how much they're wrong and I'm right. You'd be surprised to find out that doesn't work. And then I learned from making those mistakes that the one thing that I'm trying to do, which has become something that is very rare in today's generation, is have an open conversation about anything without the fear of being canceled or the fear of being told that you're, I don't know, a racist or anything else. The ability to speak and have those tough conversations is rare today. And when I understood that is my mission, it changed the whole thing. And I've had students at the end of these conversations come and ask for the news stations that they should watch, the books that they should read about this conflict throughout the years, not only now. And there is that hope that when you do engage in that conversation that is rare today, something in them feels like that's what they've been missing. That open conversation, that place and that ability to sit down and talk about the hard things that we need to talk about. So there is hope.
So really a question, I think, for both of you based on this, and I'm very interested in your views, is did you find the experience of producing the book somehow cathartic? In that, reading through it and thinking of places which are so well known, thinking of a description, for instance, of Route 232 as the highway of blood, a road we know very well, going to places we know very well. Was it somehow, did you find it cathartic, and did you find it enabled you to find that sense of hope for the future as well? Both of you, both Oriya as the editor, the co-editor, and Yadin in telling your story that way.
Wow, so actually I wasn't supposed to write this book. As you said, I'm the chief editor of Magid, and I just offered Yadin Gelman, which is an amazing writer, an amazing movie creator. I offered him to write the book, and then only after a month and a half, he offered me to join him to do this amazing work. And the reason I didn't even want to touch this book was because I was so scared from this content. Okay, I think a lot of people in Israel still are walking in the street like this, not to look like in the eyes of October 7th. They just don't want to touch it. They don't want to hear about it. And I think both Yair and I experienced here, I think the word is cure. And we really gained resilience from this book. And this is really, really interesting, because if anyone asked us to write a book that will give Israel hope and joy and, I don't know, comfort them in some way, but the term is that we shouldn't write about anything that relates to terrorism and bad things, okay? Then maybe we would have written a book about, I don't know, good things in Israel. We invented a lot of good things like Waze and cherry tomatoes, if you know, I don't know. And also the Eurovision we won a few times. And this book would be so amazing and everyone would be really happy. But we know for sure today that if this was the book, it wouldn't even give us 10% of the light that we gained from this book, because I understand now that there's some, I think, Yadin, you said it, I think you said it today also when we spoke, that there's some kind of light that you cannot gain if you're not willing to go through darkness. And this book gives us the most, the purest content of human beings, juxtaposed to I don't know the word, but for those human animals of Hamas. So the answer to your question is yes, this work really, really gave us hope, and a lot of readers gain hope from this book, from those people.
I agree. I think that, first of all, it's a very, very hard read. Mm-hmm. And it took me a very long time to read a small amount of stories. Still haven't finished it because I know the people, I know the kibbutzim, I know these places, I've been there, and it's a hard read. But I'm sure the first time you read it, you'll cry. The second time you'll read it, you'll cry again. And then the third time you'll read it, you'll start seeing the humans behind these stories and behind these words. And I think that is what makes this book a therapy or a cure to what we're going through, because they're human. And everybody in this book is an amazing human being that went to save his friends, his family, or people he doesn't know. And that's the cure of this book, which is why it's so important to read the whole thing. Don't be like me, read the whole thing.
So what do you think it is that gives the drive and the impetus to the people who are in this book to do what they did? Thinking of your story, thinking of what you described about it, thinking of a generation of 18-year-olds. I think of some of my friends' children who I was surprised when they got driver's licenses. And now this is what they've had to go through, things which they never dreamt they would, and things that their parents never dreamt they would go through. What do you think gives them the impetus? What are the values that drive them to act like this rather than just, I don't know, sit and be a YouTube influencer and earn their living that way?
So I'll only speak about myself. I'll let Oriya talk about the rest because she knows them better than I do. What drove me, first of all, and I'm completely honest about this, I did exactly what I know to do. I didn't do anything that was out of my abilities as a soldier. And my obligation to my people, my country, and my uniform. And growing up in Israel, growing up in Jerusalem, growing up through Second Intifada, Knife Intifada, Lebanon War, all the wars in Gaza that I was in, 2014, Return of the Boys, all those battles. The commitment to your country only grows, and the commitment to your people only becomes even stronger. And when this type of thing happens, you go back to do exactly what you know how to do and what you're obligated to do. And that's what drives you. Your team, who all go together to fight, and the faces of the people that you come to fight for and with. And that's what drove me, and I'm sure a lot of these people in the book.
That is so accurate, really. I can tell you a story about a soldier that spoke to me after one lecture I gave. In this lecture, I read the exact part I read to you now about about how she's like apologizing to her children. And he came afterwards and he told me, I'm wounded. I have two bullets in my back, and people thought, when I got those bullets, I thought that maybe I would die, but if not, I would probably be handicapped. And he told me, I want to ask you something. All is asking for forgiveness from her children. She's maybe feeling a little bit of regret. I don't know. And he asked me, are there other heroes that he asked, do you know other heroes that feel the same thing, that ask for forgiveness from their family? So I told him, actually, yes, in the book, there are many heroes. This is the words they say before they die. So he said, and I asked, and I see that he's like really, really struggling something, and he closed his eyes, and I asked him, why do you ask that? And he told me, when I got those bullets, the first thing I thought about was my wife and my children, that they don't deserve to have a husband and a father that is handicapped or dead. And I felt this regret, and this regret haunts me. Because I'm telling you, Oriya, I'm gonna go back to this battlefield. I'm not regretting for fighting. I'm proud of like being a soldier and fight, but I regret for what I did to them. And it haunts him. And I sat with him and I said, okay, what am I gonna say to him? I just said, and I said, you know what? I don't know what to say to you. But then Hashem gave me words, I think, and I told him, you know what? I just want to like reflect to you one thing that I see here. If I would, chas v'chalila, got like injured, I think the first thought in my head, and I also address this to you, Yadin, we know your thoughts because you shared it with us. I think the first thought would be, oh my God, I'm going to be handicapped. It's so hard. I don't want to be handicapped. Oh my God, how am I going to manage? Okay, and I would probably think about myself because it's human, okay? But when I speak to you, I hear someone that the first thing he thinks about is other people that he is obligated to, people that he loves. I just want to tell you one thing. I don't know anything about your regret. I don't know anything. I just know that your kids have a father that the first thing he thinks of is them when he is almost dying. Also, your wife has a husband that the first thing that her husband is thinking about, and also I think Adva has the same thing, is them. So you're asking me what drives them to do this? This is the material that Am Israel is built from. People that think about others before they think about themselves.
I really thank you both for those wonderful answers. And what you said brings to mind someone whom, of course, many of us knew of very well, Sarah and Daniel Perez, Hashem Yikom Damo, of course, was adopted by a number of communities, including the Bournemouth and Elsrie community. One of the most amazing things that Rav Doron says about his son was that they found Daniel's diary after he was killed, and his motto was, "If not me, then who?"
Right.
This is
That's the name of the story.
If not me, then who? And the sense of value, the sense of Yadin, as you've said to us earlier, and also this evening, the sense of having a purpose, the sense of living a life of meaning, and aspiring to the values which you've described is a remarkable and an awesome thing. And the way it's been demonstrated by these heroes is, I think, is awe-inspiring. There's no other way of putting it. And you've brought these stories to our attention. You've catalogued them for not just for this generation, but for the future as well. And in doing so, you have taught us very much, I think, about what it means to be a Jew and what it means to be a human being. On that basis, if I could perhaps ask you both just for a closing message for everybody this evening. I'll start with you, Oriya.
Yeah, okay, so I actually want to quote Rabbi Lord Jonathan Zacks, that we in Magid have the privilege to publish his books in English and in Hebrew. He said something about hope. By the way, I don't really remember that. I think you should quote it instead of me, because I don't exactly remember the right words, but it's the whole thing I was trying to give you tonight, the message that the heroes gave us about not giving in to despair is all summed up in this sentence. So can you remind me this sentence? We spoke about it today, that's why I'm asking.
He said that faith has kept the Jewish people, and the Jewish people have kept faith. And that's how they can look forward with hope to the future.
So this is the message, that it's not that only Jewish people kept faith. It's faith that kept us. And I want to tell you personally, that's I think I started with this in atmosphere when I started this speech, that personally, it's not just that I'm talking about despair. I really, really felt despair this year. You know what? I'm going to tell you something crazy. Just 1,000 people are going to hear me telling me something really crazy. I told you today. My husband and I decided to take thousands of shekels and buy gold. Why? And hide it in somewhere. I'm not going to tell you where. Can you understand why? Should I explain why? You told me this is the most post-Holocaust thought you have ever. Because we really are not sure that this state is gonna, exist. And 2, 10, 20, 30 years. We don't know when this one day come, and we'll have to pick up our things and just run away. By the way, I'm just going to say one thing about it. It's not because of the Israeli people. It's not because of Hamas and Palestinian people. This feeling and this fear of us is because of the international community. I think that it depends on them, whether Israeli state is going to exist or not. So what was the question?
So your kind of closing message.
Yeah, so the closing message is
Buy
that,
gold.
what?
Buy gold.
Buy gold, that's the message. Do it. Exactly. So not to give in to despair, and to know that faith kept the Israeli people, not just the other way around. So thank you.
Okay, I'll say 3 things. The first thing that we talked about was the main thing that my lesson from this whole thing was is being humble. It's new. And the reason that's my message and what I learned for myself, and maybe I had to go through something so extreme to learn this lesson, is because I'm at a point in my life where I can never say the words, I'm here because of myself. I am the one who brought myself to where I am today I built myself alone. I can never say that. I have a whole line of people that I owe my life to. From my friends who risked their life to save me, to my commanders, to everybody around me who fought for that whole hour to get me out of under those terrorists, to the paramedics, the doctors, the pilots, Adva, who moved me from one hospital to another to save my life. And I owe everybody the fact that I'm alive. And being so humble that you can never say I'm here because of myself is the biggest lesson that I learned from this whole war. That's the first thing. The second thing is we talk a lot about heroes and heroism and what that is. And it's my personal request that when you read this book, understand that when you're reading these amazing situations that feel movie-like scenes, on the battlefield, there is nothing heroic about it. The battlefield is a horrible place, filled with death and blood and friends that are dying in front of you and bloodthirsty terrorists in front of you and families who are suffering, and you're suffering as well. And there is nothing heroic about it when you're there. When you feel that you're dying and you keep on fighting, it's not because you think that you're a hero, it's because there's nothing else to do. And when you read these stories, I said this before, remember that these are humans. And they went through unheroic situations that became heroic stories. And the next thing that I'm going to say about that is that because it's humans and it's regular day-to-day people that left their families and their friends and their houses and went to fight, or heroes that were in their houses and were attacked and kept on fighting, we cannot wait for anybody to save us. And we will not wait for anybody to save us. We haven't, and we will not. And if we have terrorist organizations around us that want to kill us, and we have international community who desert us and go against us, we don't care anymore. We will keep fighting, and we will win this war. Thank you very much.
Wow. This is amazing.